All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today in a super duper special treat for our March 2021 Coffee and CU event from the DVA SIG. Today is a super exclusive and limited event for an up close and personal Q&A session with the famous Dr. John O'Neill. Before we get to that, so let me just get through some housekeeping items. This event is being recorded and it's going to be uploaded into our DBA page after the event. If you're here for CEUs, there's going to be a Google form where you sign in and out. The sign in form has been sent out in the Zoom chat, but I'll send it out again after I finish my spiel. Just make sure to sign in within 5 minutes from now. So it's about 10:03 Pacific Standard Time, so 10:08, 10:09-ish, to be eligible for your CEUs. The same process is going to happen at the end. You'll get a sign out form. Just make sure to fill that out within 5 minutes of the presentation ending. And today's event is going to count for one BACB Type 2 Learning CE. And if you're here for CEUs, we're going to be monitoring the attendance. So if you're on a phone, just make sure that you just email us at disseminateaba@gmail.com with your phone number used, your full name, and your email. And like I mentioned before, during the presentation, we would love it if you wanted to keep your cameras on. Since it is an exclusive event, this is really just such a big chance to really get to know Dr. O'Neill. But of course, there's no pressure at all. And since this is a special Q&A event, ask any and all questions that you may have. Lastly, if you want to pick up some cool swag while just supporting our dissemination grant, you can swing by our Cafe Press store to pick up a mug, like so, for your future Coffee and CEU events. Okay, now finally, I get to do the fun part of introducing our speaker today, Dr. John O'Neill. Dr. John O'Neill, PhD, BCBA-D, LABA, is the founder of Contextual Behavioral Science Institute and the host of Public House podcast. He has dedicated his life to conducting research into police training, as well as working with police groups to support positive behavior change and build strong relationships with the behavioral science community. In Dr. O'Neill's previous presentation last month, he explored his applied research with police academies across the US and provided examples of how behavioral science can be utilized to improve outcomes and develop collaborative relationships with police departments. He has also addressed common misconceptions about police training and identified some of the limitations of behavior analytic methods and procedures in the context of police academy training. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. O'Neill.
Thanks for having me.
And so just to kick us off, because we got a lot of questions in, so we're going to start off with some questions about research. So one question that did come through was, as an ABA graduate student, where would you recommend looking for BACB supervision or internship hours within the area of criminal justice and law enforcement?
Yeah, it's a good question because there's really not much of it available currently, as far as I know. There's a couple of Facebook groups that, share materials and events and that sort of thing, but I don't know of any graduate programs where you can get specifically BACB supervision hours. I mean, you could set that up with an advisor who works in that area if you were able to find one, but I mean, I don't know of any programs that have a track in criminal justice or a track in anything directly related to the policing world. So it's one of those things where sort of blazing a trail and hopefully opportunities like that become available as we progress. But currently there just aren't very many opportunities like that available, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a bummer, but hopefully in the future, right?
Yeah, and if anyone in the audience knows of any opportunities, please feel free to chime in if you're aware of something.
Yeah, I might be able to help out a little bit here, if you guys are okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I speak a lot. My doctorate's in business, but I was a cop for 23 years, in the military for 30 years, and I deal with decision making, sense making, wicked problem theory, a bunch of other things. One of the things we found out, I'm an expert witness in police practices, training specifically in use of force in the courts. And what Dr. O'Neill, what John has described is absolutely true in his prior stuff. What happens though in criminology is when they pursue what you're trying to do through the criminal schools, there's not a lot of overlap. They don't even understand the concept of transdisciplinary research or anything else. So to John's point, I would echo it. A lot of times what you can do is go find a school such as management or anything else with an advisor that already studies things like organizational theory. And then a subset of that is heuristics and behavior and how it's affecting the decision. And say, I'd like to go over to the cop shop and work on this problem set with this dimension. And what you can find then is it all of a sudden, the light bulb's gone. I never really thought about it, but you see, schools of cognitive science and schools of business don't cross paths, yet sense making is what leads to decision making. So to John's point, I would echo it. Go find an advisor, get your problem statement to have one of the dimensions of behavioral aspects to it. But the behavioral aspects are applied in a pragmatic fashion to a problem set. And then I can tell you that that's what I've been speaking to at multiple conferences. And they're open to it. The police agencies are open to it. They know they have to find a way of doing it. But I can also tell you, if you don't have an advisor, if you don't have someone else that's going to act as your person, you're not going to find in the police agency. You're not going to find someone in the police agency that's grounded in true, like the stuff that John works on, and true research or scientific methods. They're going to be very few and far between. So just a thought.
Yeah, you would almost want somebody from the policing world to be on your committee, and then have a behavior analyst or a BCBA who is your research advisor, the person that
Right.
helps you design and create the study, and then you have that applied input from the person in the policing world. That'd be the ideal setup. But then obviously it's finding a BCBA supervisor who has that interest and wants to do that kind of work and is willing to collaborate with officers. And then there are quite a few BCBAs out there who are interested in doing that kind of work. But I think as with many areas where they're underserved or there's not much research going on yet, you're going to have to do a lot of that work yourself. You're going to have to go out and find that person in the policing world. And then you're going to have to try and find an advisor who's open to that kind of work as well. So a lot of it's going to be on you to set it up in a fashion that works for you.
The Society of Police and Criminal Psychologists has a good mix between cop practitioners, policing practitioners, and cognitive scientists being psychologists and psychiatrists within the police world. And you might ping them to see if there's anybody there that can sort of give you the next breadcrumb to the potential advisor.
Yeah, the other difficulty that you're probably going to run into is ABA is one of the few fields that really does applied research. I mean, working directly with the participants to improve or address some skill or behavior in general. So a lot of folks aren't used to doing that type of research. They're more used to analyzing pre-existing data, looking for trends or patterns in data sets and that sort of thing. So you're probably going to have to do quite a bit of explaining about just what behavior analysis does and what the goals are of applied research and behavior analysis.
That was a great question. So I guess that kind of leads into a segue of, if you did want to look into research, what behavior analytical journals do you look to submit research around the areas of law enforcement?
So we've submitted to the more applied journals like JABA, We published in Behavior Analysis and Practice, and that's a really good avenue because they're really focused on the difficulties and the limitations of conducting science in an applied setting. So they are open to research methods that have been adapted to work within the applied context. I mean, you just can't, like if you take, for example, a functional analysis, right? In certain clinical settings, it's just impossible to run a functional analysis because there are so many other things, other moving parts going on at the same time. And the same thing goes in police academies. So they have their own schedule. They have their own goals and mission and things that they have to accomplish within the schedule. So introducing research methods interferes with that, for one, and you have to figure out how to make it work within the context of the training setting. So that's often a challenge. But journals like Behavior Analysis and Practice understand that and are open to research methods that have been slightly adapted to work and still maintain experimental control within the studies. We've also submitted to a journal called Applied Ergonomics. So this deals with the interaction between humans and tools within the policing world, obviously firearms, tasers, anything on their duty belts would be considered a tool that they use. So Applied Ergonomics has been very receptive, and we've published 2 studies on the unintentional discharge of firearms in that particular journal. Outside of that, you can look into the motor learning journals as well. So they tend to be more, they tend to take somewhere between a general and cognitive psychological approach to teaching skills. So those types of the motor learning journals are open to the type of research that we do, but you're likely going to have to reword things into terms that fit within their philosophical view, which is not impossible. It's not completely incompatible, but it takes some additional work to learn how they speak about procedures and methods and the types of terms that they use.
And so another segue, beautiful, to that is, do you know what's being worked on or studied right now? Is there any current research that's going on?
As far as police academy training, or just in the policing world in general?
It sounds like just in general in the world between the intersection of BA and police.
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing with our firearms safety and police academy skills training, physical skills training aspects, and hoping to do stuff in the classrooms sometime soon as well. But outside of that, there's a lot of focus on officer memory following use of force. There's a lot of interest in research dealing with de-escalation, whether it be tactics or just the notion of de-escalation. What does de-escalation mean? Is it a process? Is it some sort of tool that's used? So there's a lot of interest in research outside of ABA in those 2 areas. And then the company I used to work for, Force Science, still does a lot of research on officer movement and suspect movement during use of force scenarios. So they're interested in reaction times, movement times. They're interested in firing times and those sorts of things. And they also do work related to memory and stress. Stress is another big area of interest. So how stress affects officers during use of force incidents. So I would say memory, stress, movement times, reaction times. Those are 3 big areas of interest to researchers outside of the field of ABA. Within ABA, I've seen a handful of folks collaborating with police departments, helping them design trainings for officers on how to respond to individuals with disabilities. so kids with autism, that sort of thing. And that's obviously well within our wheelhouse as behavior analysts. We're very familiar with that population, but I'd like to see some behavior analysts start addressing issues like memory, short and long-term memory. We can conceptualize those behaviorally, and looking at the effects of stress, whether it be on physical skills training or the actual real world implementation of physical skills. And then more generally, I'd, I'd like to see behavior analysts conduct more research related to functional behavior assessment. So just the ABCs of everything within law enforcement. I mean, you look at use of force, training, interviewing, report writing, all sorts of different skills that police officers use on a daily basis. We can apply things like functional behavior assessments to and task analyses to help improve a lot of things within law enforcement, I think, but you just don't see very much of it at the moment. And hopefully we can continue to build on the research that we've done and sort of branch out into other areas as we go.
Definitely. So with that, we're going to kind of transition over to more of application and collaboration pieces that the questions had come up. So with your work, Dr. O'Neill, how has the general openness from police departments been in terms of collaboration with behavior scientists?
Yeah, they've been very open. I think once you sit down and you have a discussion about how what you want to do research wise is intended and should directly benefit them in their day-to-day work, they're 100% on board. I mean, why wouldn't you be? Why wouldn't you want somebody to come in who has an outside perspective and an expertise in a particular area of research, who is not guaranteeing, but has the intent to directly benefit you as a professional in the work that you do? I mean, that's something I think most professions would welcome. So yeah, they've been very open, and they tend to give very good suggestions about the design and procedures within the research, because obviously they have all the applied knowledge. They know way more about their job than you do, obviously, right? So a lot of the times it's on you to sit and listen and try to learn as much as you can about what they do and how they approach things, and then think about how your knowledge and your expertise in behavior analysis, how can I adapt that to try to make some improvements and help them out? As long as that's your approach, they're completely open to it, and they often give excellent recommendations on how things can be fitted within their profession.
Very true.
Has anyone in the audience reached out and had difficulties making connections or maintaining relationships?
Yes.
How so?
So I am working for, I'm trying to branch out into this world with public safety in general. And the company that I work for is based out of St. Louis, and I'm in Florida. So I just happened to meet my mentor and start, this work about a year ago. And since then I've been trying to network and, reach out, just kind of tell them what we provide, that sort of thing. We're more in the OBM realm. So looking at diversity, inclusion, and leadership is our focus. And it's been difficult just to get those first initial contacts, and as well, get the buy-in. I think a lot of times, when it comes to both of those subjects, they're like, we're fine. We have online trainings, we have this and that. But then they, when I say, what are some things that you would want some help with, then they can list a myriad of reasons. They're not having retention, they're struggling with getting people coming out of the academies and wanting to, come to their department and that sort of thing. So they see that there's a problem, but they don't it's probably how I'm presenting it, but they don't see the connection between really valuing, what we can bring to the table. So yeah, in my experience, it's been difficult.
Yeah, things like retention and burnouts and those sorts of things are obviously like anything that you're going to work with them on that's a very long-term outcome. So if you can find something that's short and sweet and can give them immediate or demonstrate immediate improvements or some sort of immediate effect, that might help with the buy-in aspect. Because yeah, they do have a lot of issues around these long-term goals for whether it be retention or injury prevention during skills training and those sorts of things. These are things that you're going to have to try out over the course of months and months before you see any sort of effect. So if there is something that you can provide an immediate outcome on, that would probably help a little bit. And yeah, oftentimes it is difficult to make that contact because these folks are incredibly busy. I mean, they have schedules packed from day to day and they barely have time to breathe. So I don't know. I don't know the setup, how it works for you locally. If you can show up to the academy and ask to speak to a representative. A lot of academies you can have a brief meeting just to introduce yourself in person. That might help as well. Mm-hmm. John, maybe you have some feedback on that.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to echo everything John said, and what I want you to do is just think about something, and I'll take one specific point. Imagine you're police management. For the last X amount of years, you've been told everything that you're doing is incorrect. There's better ways of doing something. You have every day people showing up on your doorstep saying they have the correct way of doing it. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, I'm just going to be honest, they just get tired. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, even if you think there's a better way to do it, you are answering to a city council, you are answering to a county commissioner. In the Academy for Florida, which I work with, you're answering to basically a standardization committee. And so the idea is like, yeah, I want to change syllabus, but so the thing is, you're viewed as potentially more work with little value. So again, I don't pass judgment. I leave ego at the door. It doesn't have a lot of benefit in research. So here's the thing. I'll take a page out of a Cynefin framework type of modeling with using complicated systems, right? If you were to basically show up and say, hey, I can give you a couple of insights by conducting these very short-term, in Cynefin they refer to safe to fail probes or experiments, but it's a different way of thinking. And while I'm building up my research, because I'm not going to tell you it's going to be a one-year study that I won't publish until to do this and it has to go under peer review. Well, they're like, I don't have time for that. But if you say in the middle of that, I can find little nuggets during that, and I will give you ways to implement those nuggets if they have value, you might get a little bit more traction. So part of your research design can focus on not only getting an understanding at the end of it, that your research increases your knowledge of whatever you're looking into, but the idea that along the way, it's pragmatic and it can give nuggets of what to do and what not to do within whatever they're doing. And to John's point, basic stuff about how about just changing the frame of heuristics? The very nature of a police academy is you're building heuristics. So the fact is, if you're doing that, are there other ways that you can make sure that you can build in a simple feedback loop that allows you to examine and refine your own heuristics within self-reflection on your own? And there's already much research that says that works. So just doing like that, you can do that with 10 or 15 people, and it can be voluntary enrollment. Okay, and you can see, but doing like that, I think if you have to show them that you're giving them nuggets of potential value with no more energy expenditure than what they're already doing, because they're tapped out.
Right.
So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and just to build off of that a little bit, if you are able to get an in-person meeting, maybe you can ask to observe an academy training session or observe one of the scenarios that they're running through, whether that be a use of force scenario or um, they have a handful of different scenarios that they'll run during training academies. But if you can ask to just be an observer and just sit back and take some notes, maybe that's a way you can give them some immediate feedback. Like, hey, here's a couple of little nuggets, like John said, that might be useful to you just from an outsider perspective.
Yeah, and Liz, the other thing I would add on is if you show up and you would, the same way that a cop would show up on your doorstep and say, I don't know what you do. I don't have the expertise that you do. Yet a lot of times researchers will show up on a cop's doorstep and says, I know your job better than you do because I know the human brain, or I know your job better than you do because I've been in the university for many, many years. In the cop world, you no longer have any credibility. Mm-hmm. So when you are an observer, be a true observer. Walk in there and say, treat me like I was part of your Citizens Academy. Treat me like I was a show me. And don't make a rush to judgment. Spend time in what's normally referred to in the sense-making space. Don't try to come to any conclusions, just truly, your only goal there is to understand. And they will sense that your goal is to understand them, and then you'll build a relationship of credibility. Then they can begin to listen to how you might help them. If you walk in and you tell them, I'm going to help you, they're already getting enough help. So people help them every day.
No, I hear that all the time.
Ask more questions than you give answers to begin with. Citizens Academies, if your academy runs citizen days, go to those. That's a great way to see how they train and the types of scenarios that they run. You'll get to run through the scenarios yourself. They'll put you through as an officer. That's a fantastic experience. We worked with a department in Minnesota to help design their Citizen Day, and it was fantastic to see. They had some reporters come in. They had some regular off the street citizens come in and run through the academy, and it was incredible to see people starting to understand just how stressful a police officer's job can be during things like traffic stops, domestic disturbances, and those sorts of things. So yeah, Citizens Academy would be an excellent way to get a better understanding of what they do, but also B, you can provide some feedback based on your behavior analytic understanding of how they're going about their Citizens Academy training. And you obviously they don't tend to be huge events. There probably will be maybe depending on the size of the department, but the ones that I've been involved in had 10 to 20 people with multiple officer trainers present. So you have plenty of opportunity to talk directly with the people who actually set up the day and the event. So that's a great way to get some experience and possibly create some relationships.
And Liz, I can tell you the people that are there teaching will be more than willing to talk to you. Absolutely. I taught Citizen Academies for years and everything else. Now, if you want to try an interesting experiment, and I guess you could publish it as a phenomenology study, is keep your own journal when you go in there and see if some of your preconceptions change over time during the Citizen Academy, and wonder if that preconceptual change in your own mind will change the way you look at your research question. Be an interesting case study.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth, for asking those questions. Those are awesome. So I think Kathleen might have had a couple of questions as well. Kathleen, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Dr. O'Neill, I was wondering if you had any experience working with crime analysts within the police department and using any of their collected data for any of your research.
I have not, no. The closest to that would be our unintentional discharge studies, where we gathered reports from multiple departments across the US and analyze that data. But as far as crime statistics or crime prediction and prevention, I've not done any work in that area. There is a program, I'm trying to think, the professor's name is Craig Bennell. He is up in Canada and Carleton. I think it's Carleton University up in Canada, but the professor's name is Craig Bennell, and he works directly with the departments up there, and he has access to all of um, their crime data, and they do a lot of analyses like that, looking at prevention and prediction and those sorts of things, and patterns in crime. Um, so that's the only lab that I'm aware of. I'm sure there are others doing that type of work, but I'm not in that world really at all. I try to stick to the police academy training aspects. Although I think behavior analysts could get into that area and help, but it's just not my wheelhouse.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Kathleen, if you want to look into that, I stood up and ran multiple crime analyst units. What's your linkage? Why are you thinking that the data from the crime analyst unit is linked to behavioral type of either predecessors or outcomes?
Yeah, so I am currently in school and I'm looking into this for my thesis. I have a shadowing opportunity coming up with my local PD's crime analyst, and just looking for some sort of link between ABA and the police academy or criminal justice. So it's just something I'm starting to explore and wondering if there's any current research done into
Yeah,
it.
have you looked into any of Rusmo's work and the concept of geographical profiling?
A little bit, but just starting to read it. I don't.
If you do, that will be your link. So the fact is, if you take a look at the past work on that, and Kim Rusmo is a retired RCMP, Dr. Rusmo out of Canada, and he was basically hunting serial killers, and the behavioral patterns of how people hunt was limited down, and he was able to predict with certainty greater than chance about where the serial killer would have his hunting ground, and you would have two isocline type hotspot type things where they either lived or where they hunted. And what they did is they took that same behavioral analysis and used it in Seder City for IEDs. They used it in Jerusalem for bombs, because people hunt their prey the same way as a human. They just have different prey. And so if you want to link behavioral to crime analysis, you might want to take a look at geographical profiling.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes FBAs to the next level, right? I mean,
Oh.
there's so much more complex and cool stuff that we can do beyond just looking at the immediate and antecedents and consequences, right? There's a whole history associated with crimes that fits within an FBA analysis, but we just do. In our field currently, we just don't really look that broadly when we're doing FBAs. That's exciting, though. I hope you're able to make progress on that. Let me know how it goes, Kathleen.
And Kathleen, did you want to ask your other question about articles regarding mentalistic topics?
Sure. This was from something you said a little bit ago, but I was just curious if you had any recommendations for specific articles with ABA conceptualizations of memory, like you had mentioned, or like those more mentalistic topics that ABA kind of shies away from.
Yeah, oh man, off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of the articles, but if you search the ABAI journal archives, you'll find, just use the keyword memory and a bunch of stuff will pop up.
Perfect. All right, and then I think Glendon had a couple of questions. Glendon, if you wanted to come off mute and you could ask away.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm following the case of the Asian sex workers, if you want to call them that, being quote unquote murdered in the U.S. I know based on U.S. culture, American culture, they have a heavy belief in conspiracy theories. I know from past work in the field of psychology that when you put a conspiracy theory or I know a piece of factual information out there in the media, rather than dissemination that information to an uneducated population, it goes in a haphazard approach. So it confuses a lot of people, which in psychology we call that mass hysteria, which is creating a state of confusion. So based on American culture and profiling, why is it that you guys or people in American culture allow that behavior if they know that if you're going to persist with that behavior all the time, it can create a negative concern in terms of into criminality? Why is it that you allow information that allowed to confuse the public out there? Why is it that or is it that you don't have control of the media? If you get what I mean, do you
Wow,
understand?
this is not within my wheelhouse at all. But I think what you're asking is something
Mm.
along the lines of why do or why does mass hysteria occur around things like the shootings that recently happened at the salon, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
that.
mean, I think so. I can't. I'll try to relate this back to the policing world in general. I think that our media currently
Mm.
does a terrible job of reporting objective facts about whether it be shootings such as that, whether it be about police use of force incidents. I think our media has become incredibly biased and clickbaity, for lack of a better term. There's a focus on ratings and making money off the news as opposed to reporting objectively about the facts of the incident and jumping to conclusions based on whatever political affiliation a news station has. So, yeah, I think our reporting and news outlets are doing a pretty poor job at the moment, and I think that's probably the source of a lot of confusion when it comes to the public's interaction with the law enforcement world.
Okay, to follow up the a part B, profiler, I use profiling skills. In the case scenario where the guy quote unquote murdered or reportedly murdered these Asian sex workers, I know you do a lot of copycatting. Is it similar to a copycat of the Ted Bundy situation? Because Ted Bundy was a quote unquote like a serial killer where he murdered women who quote unquote bear bearings to what he had in terms of a relationship with his mother. So I'm worrying, not worrying, I'm wondering, that's the correct word there, if that bears a liken to the Ted Bundy situation and creating a copycat, or is it a case of just pre-murder, somebody that just, the guy just got it and just, maybe he just had a trigger in terms of having a bad day, someone said something, someone was off about the weather pattern, something was not correct about breakfast or somebody that caused the incident, or you don't know. What's your theory there?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, Glendon. I
Okay.
really, I don't pay much attention to the news, honestly, at the
Mm.
moment. So I don't know very much about that case. So yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't really comment on it.
Okay. And last question. Using it goes back to a real we call childhood experiences and observation learning your environment during childhood. Do you think that if you're going to look at the Adolf Hitler situation where he was quote unquote in abusive relationship with his mom and dad, where his mother carried a subservient role to his dad, do you think that these performance in terms of child experience can and the observation learning experience can what we call create murder? Because if you're in an abusive cycle in a relationship where a man abuses your mother and you are so what we call subjected to that to play a subservient role to the man, and in order to let's say liberate yourself as a human being, you take on different performance in terms of aggression, dominance, and you look for what we call a role model in terms of a male that give you these stories of regale of how a man should be. Do you think that these personality traits in terms of these behavioral different aspects can create what we call a murderer? In terms of being in an abusive relationship, creating an abusive cycle, and then facing different abnormalities in terms of childhood experiences that can build up into what we call creating the perfect murder, based on your
Again,
police training, because I don't know. I never
yeah,
actually worked with the police, so I just asking the questions.
yeah, no
Go
problem.
ahead.
Yeah, it's all these questions are way out of my wheelhouse, but I would imagine that
Okay.
observational learning has a lot to do with the development of anyone who commits a crime, and any people in general. Observational learning is a huge part of development and how we see the world and how we interact with others. So I don't know about Hitler specifically and how observational learning affected him,
All
but
right.
I'm sure it did have some impact. So yeah, sorry I couldn't answer your last two questions very well.
Okay. Question: do you know anyone, let's say that does profiling in terms of policing that you can? Okay, I've been attached to. I don't know if you ever heard of Professor Lawrence Allison. He's a professor at the University of Liverpool in the United Kingdom. He's great in terms of policing psychology. He directed my program in forensic psychology and criminal investigation with that university. I sent a consultation proposal to him because I'm attached to the Stewart Football Academy to move based on the advice of my advisor, Mr. Clark. So basically, he's an excellent, let's say, police trainer. But in terms of actually commenting the process with working with police, I find that not say I'm too advanced for them or too advanced in terms of their methodologies, but working with local or interacting with local police here on island is very I don't know, haphazard. I don't think that they're understanding methodologies because I'm trained under the British High Commission here, and when I attended university and college, I was trained by British psychologists or American psychologists. So in terms of understanding Caribbean policing methods, I have a very hard time understanding that. But since I've been reintegrated into the British High Commission system, and updating my methodology in terms of policing or investigative techniques. And I'm in transit to work with Professor Allison once again. I think that I don't know. I'm looking forward to it in terms of looking at different aspects of profiling into my area, which is called behavioral sports psychology. But the worrying factor is interacting with police because I don't want to say that the level of education, because on island you take 3 CSCs to enter the police force here. I don't know how it works in the UK, but we'll have to speak to Professor Allison about that. But my worrying factor is the interaction between someone who's educated to a certain extent and working with someone who's not as up to your level or up to your par in terms of education. How would you remedy that situation?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, Glendon. Your questions
Okay.
are outside of my scope of practice and
Okay.
research, unfortunately. So
Okay.
sorry, I don't have anything for you.
Okay. All right. I guess we'll have to bring it. Thank
Yeah.
you. Mute me.
Good luck, though. Good luck.
Yeah, thanks for those
Thank
questions,
you.
Glendon. We'll be excited to hear about if you find any answers to those questions.
No problem.
So just for the sake of time, I do want us to come back to the submitted questions just to make sure everybody can get a chance to get their answers. So this one is, Dr. O'Neill, what do you envision for the path ahead? So for both your specific work and for the field of behavior analysis and police in general.
What do I envision? I would like to see a behavior analyst working directly with every police academy in the United States. If not employed directly with the departments, contracted and consulting on a regular basis to help improve the training on an ongoing sort of fashion. I would love to see that. I would love to see more behavior analysts doing the type of work that we're doing with New York State, where we're helping them to revise and improve their not only their physical skills training curriculum, but their classroom curriculum, and how academy trainers go about teaching new cadets all of the material that's involved with police academies. I think that outside of autism, that's the number one area where behavior analysts can be useful in law enforcement, is helping to improve the academy training. Um, so yeah, hopefully we can provide some of those opportunities moving forward for, internships and consultation opportunities. Um, but yeah, I'd love to see more behavior analysts working directly with police academies to improve the training.
Definitely. And kind of related to that question as well, with the field coming out with RFT and ACT, how do you think this is going to come into play with police academy training?
That's a good question. So a colleague and I are actually working on an upcoming episode for my podcast, Public House, and that's going to be the exact focus. It's how does RFT and ACT relate to the policing world? And I think, I mean, obviously RFT is a newer conceptualization of verbal behavior. I don't know that our RFT methods right now are useful in an applied setting, but they can help to inform and be the basis of acceptance and commitment therapy or training, whichever one you want to call it. But yeah, I think ACT, we were talking about retention and burnout and stress earlier. I think that acceptance and commitment therapy could be very useful for officers, and as a mindfulness-based approach to dealing with the day-to-day stress involved with the policing profession. And yeah, I'm excited about the potential for RFT and ACT to have some impact in that world. But most of the RFT research is more basic in nature, very lab oriented, and most of the ACT research is very outpatient focused, I would say, in that not much of the ACT research gives real world or demonstrates real world effects. It's all within the context of that research study. And typically those are done in a clinical setting. They're done in multiple sessions where the individual goes in and speaks with a therapist, and the sessions are conducted that way. But what I'm interested in is the direct benefit to police officers on the job using mindfulness-based techniques and using an ACT-based approach to life and their profession in general. I think that could have a huge impact. And there are quite a lot of police officers who are engaging in some sort of mindfulness-based practice. I did an episode with Chip Huth on my podcast talking about how he applies mindfulness and how he feels it's a necessary and incredibly useful tool for him in how he approaches others and how he speaks to them, how he listens to and hears what others' opinions. We talked about how perspective taking, understanding somebody else's point of view and their environment and their approach to the world is incredibly important for police officers in making or having public relations and developing relationships with the members of the public and communities. So these are all areas where I think ACT could be incredibly useful. It's just, can we adapt the ACT hexaflex and all of the procedures involved in acceptance and commitment therapy? Can we adapt that to be directly useful in the day-to-day lives of police officers? And I think we can. And yeah, like I said, I'm working on an upcoming podcast episode where I'm going to discuss that with a colleague.
So another thing that, John, that you brought up for relationship frame theory for the RFT is it's really a nice bridging mechanism to other things. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
It's pushing perspectives. It's not passing judgment. It's making you recognize your perspectives. So you can go take a look at systems theory work being done by Cabrera for DSRP type of framework and systems theory. You can take a look at a bunch of other different things out there. And now you can jump from this fuzzy thing that a lot of cops think is fuzzy of ABA and say, well, how can I apply it in the real world? Not just at me being mindful, but at a policy level. Well, I can take different perspectives, and by doing that, well, now you can actually diagram those perspectives in a systems theory framework that is focused on helping people move through complexity, uncertainty into clarity, or at least into complicated instability. So the thing is, one of the nice things about RFT is it really does allow, it gives you a good leapfrog point to help anything from the line officer all the way up to the policy and decision maker. So just an observation.
Yeah, I love RFT. I've done some research in that area, but we have a long way to go for applications in the law enforcement world, for sure. In fact, I don't know of anyone doing any RFT research that would be directly of benefit in the policing world. Like John just said, it's what it is a conceptual foundation for everything verbal behavior in the policing world. So if you need to be able to describe the conceptualization and the foundation for something like ACT, that's where RFT is incredibly useful at the moment. Whether or not we're going to see applied research and lab research on things like bias, racism, implicit attitudes, those sorts of things, those are all possible moving forward. But I don't know how directly how they could be of direct benefits in the day-to-day lives of officers. But hopefully we see some of that research coming down the line, and but yeah, I think ACT is probably going to have an impact before RFT does.
Perfect. And so we're coming up on time, so this is just one last question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone that is or is interested in venturing out into this new realm, what would that be?
Sorry, one more time?
Oh, sorry. If you could give one piece of advice to someone that's interested in venturing out into this new realm, what would that be?
Listen. I think listening to not just in law enforcement and policing, in any area that you're trying to break into, it is easy to go in and want to establish yourself as somebody who knows something and has something to offer. But what's more important is demonstrating that you care and that you actually are interested in what they do and how what you do could benefit them. So yeah, listening, asking questions is incredibly important for forming relationships, especially within something like the policing world.
Perfect. Yeah, it's always important to listen, ask questions. All right, so that kind of sums up our event today. I did send out the sign out link in the chat. So if you are here for CEUs, go ahead and click that and sign out. Otherwise, I hope everyone enjoys the beautiful Saturday that we have. And if you have any other questions that come up after, you can always email us at disseminateaba@gmail.com, and we can link you up with Dr. John O'Neill.
Thanks for the questions, everyone. Those were very good questions. Fantastic. Thank you.
hopefully a big thank you to John for coming on, and also John Black for his amazing information as well. So
Yes, thank you, John.
Oh, no, absolutely, guys. I'm a big advocate for anybody doing work in this field. So that's all I'm in the book. Look me up on LinkedIn or anything else. If I can help you guys out, my background is I did 30 years in the military, 23 years in policing. I'm an expert witness for police practices. I actually advise for Science, John's prior stuff, and work with Lewinsky and crew and all the other guys and that. But my main thing is I'm just basically like going out there and trying to, I can't comprehend. My master's is in counterterrorism. My doctorate is in business with intelligence and decision making. And the commonality between all that is there's always a human in the middle of all this making a decision. And sometimes they don't know why they are. So, and boy, it would be really nice if they did. So all the stuff you guys are doing is you're spot on. So anything I can do to help. So just look me up.
fantastic. All right, everyone, then I will close out our room and go enjoy your weekends. Well-deserved weekend. Go.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Bye. Have a good one.
Thank you.